Hey there, night traveller. Tonight we're stepping behind convent walls, not for prayer, but for secrets. Because these nuns, yeah, they're not what you learned about in school. Forget the soft halos and harp music. You're about to enter a world where desire claws under woolen habits, where silence is full of whispered names, and where not everyone makes it out with their faith or reputation intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me, what city are you in? And what time is it where you are right now? It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive as the heavy wooden gates shut behind you. Stone walls surround the convent like a fortress. No going back now. The sky still grey, not quite morning, and you're handed a rough woolen robe that smells faintly of smoke and something herbal, like dried thyme. No shoes. You're barefoot already, and your skin prickles as cold creeps up from the flagstones. A grim-faced sister leads you down a corridor where light leaks through narrow slits in the wall. You can hear your breath echo in the silence. This is where you'll be reborn. They say, you're not supposed to think about your family name anymore, or what you once dreamed of. You belong to God now. But the tension in the air, that doesn't feel holy. It feels heavy, like a place where secrets have weight. Your breathing slows naturally as you settle deeper into this story. You'll meet the abbess briefly. Her face is lined like tree bark, eyes sharp as crows. She doesn't speak to you directly. Instead, she turns to one of the older sisters and mutters something in Latin. And you catch the word novice. That's you. Not a full nun. Not yet. You'll spend the next year in limbo, learning the rules, watching your every step, praying more than sleeping. They'll decide whether you're fit to take your final vows or not. Your first task, scrub the cloister, walk with a brush no bigger than your palm. You do this next to another novice. Sister Magdala, who mutters under her breath about useless piety and rolls her eyes every time someone passes. She was sent here because her older brother got all the inheritance, and her parents didn't want to pay to marry her off. Common story. You're not here because you're holy. You're here because you're disposable, settling deeper into comfort now. Let the medieval world wrap around you. By the time Compline comes, the final prayer of the day, you've been on your knees for hours, and you smell like vinegar and sweat. You're taken into the chapel, a small space with flickering beeswax candles and a large wooden crucifix that seems to watch you. You sing the Psalms in Latin, stumbling over the words. Your stomach growls, but food isn't offered again until tomorrow. Hunger, they say, purifies. You sleep in the dormitory on a straw mattress lined up next to 20 others. The scent of sweat, older linens, and candle smoke thick in the air. But you don't sleep easily, because in the next bed over, a nun whispers someone's name, not Christ's. Here's the part they don't teach you in your average church history class. Medieval convents weren't always solemn places of peace and purity. They were deeply political, often volatile spaces filled with women who didn't choose to be there. Many were dumped by their families, too rebellious, too poor for a dowry, or just inconvenient. Some were former wives whose husbands had died. Others were noble daughters considered too mouthy to marry. They were cloistered, yes, but they carried their pain and ambitions in with them. And they talked. That's the real scandal. The silence was full of words passed between beds, behind cloisters, under breath, stories, prayers, complaints, poetry, and sometimes much more. You notice quickly that the abbess has favorites. Sister Joan, always at her side. Sister Joan, who wears her veil a bit looser than the others, whose hands are never dirty, who never scrubs the floors. You find out later that Joan was born of noble blood, and rumor says her family bribed the abbess handsomely to ensure her daughter lived comfortably. Joan watches you too, little too closely. Your muscles relax completely as you drift deeper into this strange new world. Now, let's throw in a quirky fringe fact, because you deserve one. Did you know that some medieval nuns kept pet squirrels seriously? There are records, actual medieval manuscripts, describing nuns who raised red squirrels in their cells, feeding them bits of dried fruit and letting them nest in their robes. Why squirrels? Who knows? Maybe it's the medieval version of having an emotional support animal. Or maybe they just really liked something that bit everyone else but curled up in their lap. Now back to the tension. As you try to sleep, you hear keys jingling. Sister Rebecca making her rounds. She's the convent enforcer. She doesn't pray as much as she patrols, sniffing out whisperers and rebellious thoughts. If she finds you with contraband, a secular book, a stolen apple, you get sent to the reflection cell, which is less reflection and more cold stone box. She especially hates laughter. Sister Rebecca hasn't laughed in years. You're told, ever since she caught two nuns holding hands after Compline. And here's something scholars are still debating. Were medieval convents truly enclaves of spirituality, or were they more like prisons disguised as religious institutions? Some argue they offered safety and education to women who had nowhere else to go. Others believe they were cages, sometimes gilded, often bouteilles, where inconvenient women were silenced. Both can be true. Depends on the convent, depends on the nun, depends on what you choose to believe. But tonight, your faith doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here. The doors are locked, and the first layer of holy has already begun to peel away, drifting now into the gentlest sleep as history wraps around you. Morning doesn't come with sunlight. It comes with bells, loud, clanging, insistent bells that rip you out of a half-dream where you're back home, barefoot in the meadow, eating something that isn't barley stew. You're not alone in groaning. The entire dormitory stirs at once, like a hive suddenly poked. Bodies rise in the dark, some already murmuring morning prayers, others muttering curses too quiet for anyone holy to hear. The air is still cold, and someone's candle won't light, so you're dressing in the dim, struggling into your stiff wool robe while toes freeze against the stone floor. Outside, the cloister is wrapped in fog. The frost crunches under your feet as you're led in silence to Lauds. The first of the day's 8 canonical hours, the chapel's stone walls hold the chill like a grudge, and the nuns' breath clouds in front of their faces as they chant the psalm. Your voice blends into the chorus, not because you know what you're saying, but because not knowing is better than standing out. You're already starting to understand the rules. Silence is safe. Questions are dangerous. And obedience is everything. After prayer, it's time for the day's assignments. Sister Magdala is sent to the garden to prune the rose bushes. Even in winter, the thorns must be managed. You're sent to the scriptorum to assist in the binding room where they're copying devotional texts by hand. It sounds peaceful in theory. In reality, it smells like parchment and boiled leather, and the nun in charge, Sister Catalin, has a sharp eye for mistakes and a sharper tongue. You're tasked with slicing vellum pages with a curved blade so fine it could double as a surgical instrument. Your fingers are trembling, but no one cares. You slice anyway, careful not to bleed on the sacred text. And there, as you settle into the rhythm of repetitive tasks, you begin to hear the other stories. One of the older nuns, Sister Isabella, talks softly as she sharpens quills. Her voice is dry, brittle as old paper. You know. She says, not looking at you. Many of us were given to God before we could walk. You glance up. She continues, my father had 5 daughters. No song. The dowry for a marriage was 3 times what it cost to place me here. She taps her ink pot once. Economics, not pietu. That's the truth of this place. And it starts to settle on your shoulders like dust. This isn't a sanctuary of chosen devotion. It's a storage facility for inconvenient women. Daughters not pretty enough, not obedient enough, not rich enough to marry off. Widows too young. Girls too clever. Bastards too visible. The convent walls are thick, but they aren't built just to keep sin out. They're built to keep these women in. Your breathing becomes slower and more peaceful as understanding dawns. You start noticing how many of the sisters carry their family histories like wounds under their habits. Some have resigned themselves, voices hollowed out by years of obedience. Others still burn, quiet and slow, with something that might be anger or might be faith. It's hard to tell. A few still fight. There's one, Sister Avis, who catches your eye during the midday meal. She doesn't bow her head as long as the others when grace is said. She chews slower. She looks around. Later, when you're rinsing the bowls in the freezing wash house, she brushes past and whispers, don't let your thoughts get lazy. That's when they win. She's gone before you can ask what she meant, or who they are. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let these truths settle gently in your mind. That medieval convents were complex places, full of women who didn't choose their fate, but who found ways to survive anyway. Rest now in this knowledge. Tomorrow brings more secrets. Now here's something bizarre you learn around this time. Medieval nuns had fashion codes. Yeah, even though they all wore habits. Different orders had different veils, robicors, and even belt lengths to signal status. Aye, and spiritual purity. Some were practically couture. One Benedictine convent even banned leather belts because they were too luxurious. And here's the kicker. Some nuns still accessorized with little tokens, hidden embroidery, or rings from their pre-convent life tucked into hems. Holiness apparently had a loophole or two. But all this woven fabric and daily labor can't hide the truth simmering beneath the surface. Sister Hiltrud collapses during none. The afternoon prayer. One moment she's upright, the next she's slumped over, hands still locked in prayer position. There's panic. You're pushed aside as the older sisters crowd around her. Sister Rebecca scowls like someone broke a rule. The priest is summoned, not for medicine, but for absolution. She doesn't die, not yet. But you notice that no one asks what caused it. You hear the word weakness whispered like a diagnosis. In the infirmary, you see she has bruises on her arms that don't look self-inflicted. This place eats you slowly. You get fewer hours of sleep than a soldier. more work than a farmer, and no say in your own fate. But it's not just the labor, it's the subtle power dynamics. Who gets the warm water? Who eats first? Who's allowed to write verses in the margins of their psalter? It's the constant performance of submission and the quiet threat that everything you do is being watched, not just by God, but by the living. Every kindness might be a trap. Every silence might be a message. And scholars still argue about this. Were these power structures meant to enforce religious order or to maintain a social hierarchy that mirrored the world outside? Some historians insist that convents gave women rare access to literacy and leadership. Others argue those privileges came with a leash, and stepping too far out of line meant spiritual and sometimes physical punishment. There's evidence for both. But as you lay in your cot that night, listening to a mouse chew through someone's sock under the floorboards, the truth feels closer to a prison with a stained glass window. Settling deeper into rest now. Let the complexity wash over you. As you drift off, a single candle still burns near the door. You catch the shape of Sister Avis leaning against the frame. Watching the hallway, she's not supposed to be there, but she's not afraid. She turns slightly, and in the flicker of flame, you see the curve of a smile. It's not warm. It's not cruel. It's knowing. You start to wonder if the church thinks it owns these women. Why do so many of them look like they're planning something the next morning? The fog is heavier. It sits in the cloister like unspoken guilt, soft and grey, muffling everything except the bells. Your robe is damp again, because it never really dries, and your hands are cracked from cold water and lye soap. You barely recognize your own fingers anymore, thin and pink from scrubbing floors and stone steps. You're starting to look like them, hollow-eyed, quiet, pressed down by the weight of God and rules and centuries of silence. You've made it to your third day when you learn about the dowry game. It's not discussed openly. Of course, it slipped in like a side comment, casual but sharp. Sister Catalin, while correcting your uneven parchment cuts. Mutters, you slice vellum like a girl who came with a half dowry. You blink. She doesn't look up. Some come with gold, some come with nothing. It determines how you're treated. If not by God, then certainly by us. That night during supper, barley again with a lone piece of carrot, you sit next to Sister Magdala, who seems to have declared you tolerable. She leans in, voice low. You don't know about the dowry tears. You shake your head. She grins. Of course not. You're still shiny. She counts on her fingers. Tier 1. Rich girls, full dowry, sometimes a bonus, get the best beds, the soft robes, skip the grossest chores. Tier 2. Partial dowry, gets you treated fair if you don't make noise. Tier 3. No dobry, you're a mouth to feed. A burden. You'll spend most of your life in silence and cold. You stare down at your bowl. You never asked what your parents paid to put you here. You just remember the way your mother avoided your eyes the day you left. The truth begins to wrap around you like ivy. The hierarchy inside these walls mirrors the outside world. Nobility still wins. Wealth still talks. And God is more like wallpaper, a holy print over a very human power structure. The prayers are real. Yes, the belief, maybe, but underneath it all is strategy. The convent is a chessboard, and you're still figuring out if you're a pawn or something more dangerous. Your muscles relax as you accept this truth. Now here's a historical fact that hits like a cold slap. Many families used convents as parking lots for inconvenient daughters, especially noble ones. Inheritance laws meant only the eldest son got land and title. Marrying off every daughter was expensive and risky. A failed marriage could ruin alliances, but sticking a daughter behind a wall with a respectable dowry, that sealed the deal with God and society. It was neat, it was clean, and it made those daughters disappear. She chose the religious life. They'd say, in reality, most of them didn't choose anything at all. And what if they fought it? Sometimes they ran. But if they were caught, they'd be dragged back and punished, locked in stone cells, denied food, forbidden to speak for weeks. Some didn't survive, some didn't care to. In the next days, you begin to notice the tales, the way some sisters flinch at raised voices, the quiet bruises, the names muttered in sleep. Sister Isabel, the one with the parchment voice, tells you in passing, we're not angels, we're just women who got stuck with halos. And then you meet Prioress Adele. She doesn't interact much with the novices, but today she appears during meal prep. Dull, boing, lips pursed like she's permanently holding in a scolding. Her eyes sweep the room and land on you. You, she says, come with me. You're led through a side corridor you haven't seen before. Walls hung with tapestries of saints, so faded they look like ghosts. Adele walks fast. You don't ask questions. Eventually you reach a chamber with a high window and a locked cabinet. There, she opens a leather-bound register. Name is, dates, lines of Latin. She hands you a quill. You'll copy the entries from this week carefully as you write, your hand aching. She watches. After a while, she speaks. Do you know why we track the purity of bodies? You pause. Look up. She narrows her eyes. Because a chaste woman is the church's finest treasure, untouched, unblemished, and if she falls, she lets the words hang. She becomes a liability. You nod slowly. Returning to the register, she adds, more softly, your hymen is worth more than your voice. And then with a shrug, that's just the truth. There's something broken in that logic, but you're not brave enough yet to say it out loud. Drifting now into deeper understanding of this twisted world. Here's your quirky detail for this one. Some medieval convents performed literal virginity tests before women could take final vows. No yoke. The church would send midwives or matrons to physically inspect a girl's body to ensure she was pure. This was invasive, humiliating, and obviously unreliable, especially since the entire test was based on flawed biology and cultural myth. But hey, in a world where your body was a bargaining chip, everyone wanted a receipt. A wirk in. You start waking up in the middle of the night with the bells in your head. You're adjusting, but also fraying. The days blur into a cycle of cold and silence, but the evenings, they hum with something else. You start to notice that after Compline, not everyone goes straight to sleep. Some sisters linger in the dark corners of the cloister. Some whisper. You even catch Sister Joan. Yes, that Joan slipping out of the dormitory barefoot and vanishing into the scriptorium wing long after everyone else has laid down. You follow her once, just enough to see a flicker of candlelight behind the parchment room door. She's not alone. You don't recognize the other figure. They're speaking too softly to hear. Back in your court, you think about the layers of this place, the rituals, the whispers, the judgment. You wonder how many of the women here are actually living their vows, and how many are just surviving them. There's a scholar somewhere in Oxford, or maybe Bologna, who once called medieval convents the first corporations for women, structured, hierarchical, regulated by rules and bylaws. But unlike modern companies, these didn't just profit from your labor. They owned your time, your voice, your thoughts, your body. You start wondering what would happen if you broke the rules, if you said no, if you left. You already know the answer, but you're starting to wonder if someone else already tried. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, let these questions float gently through your mind. Let the weight of medieval womanhood rest lightly on your consciousness. Tomorrow brings more secrets, more whispers, more truth hiding beneath the holy veneer. Rest now. The convent keeps its secrets close, but slowly they're beginning to reveal themselves to you. The first time you hear the phrase body of Christ used with a smirk, it's Sister Magdala again. She says it during evening laundry, standing hip deep in a freezing stone basin, her hands red and raw as she slaps a tunic against a flat board. They say we're brides of Christ, she says under her breath, glancing around, but he never shows up on wedding night. Does he? She grins sideways, teeth sharp in the dim torchlight, and the other sisters don't laugh. They don't even look up. But you catch the tension in their hunched shoulders. They heard. They always hear, and someone will repeat it later when it's safer. Magdala spits in the water. Virginity. She mutters like it's something you keep in a jar. You don't respond, not because you disagree, but because you don't yet know how much truth you're allowed to think, let alone speak. It's around this time that the phrase vergo intacta starts floating through your days like an uninvited guest. You hear it from Sister Catalin in the scriptorum. You hear it from the abbess when she's counseling a nervous novice who might be showing a bit too much stomach during chores. And once you hear it muttered by a visiting friar during a homily on moral fortitude, his eyes lingering a beat too long on the line of kneeling girls. You start realizing how obsessed the church is with what's between your legs. And more importantly, with it staying unused. Entire theological frameworks rest on the idea that a woman's virtue is directly tied to her sexuality, or lack thereof. A virgin, you're holy. A widow, you're suspicious. A woman who's never married but doesn't live in a convent, you're a walking scandal. The strange part is how often that obsession turns bizarre. One of the nuns, Sister Blandina, tells you during needlework that a bishop once asked her very seriously whether she'd ever felt temptation in her dreams. I said yes, she says with a dry chuckle, because I wanted to see his face. You ask what he did. She grins. He gave me 3 extra prayers and wouldn't look me in the eye again. There's a darker edge to the virginity politics, though. You learn that some girls, very young ones, are denied entrance to the convent until their purity can be verified. Inspection, whispered like the word execution. Sometimes it's as simple as a matron lifting a skirt. Sometimes it's not. You hear of one novice who arrived bleeding after a journey with a male escort. Her acceptance was delayed 3 months while church officials argued whether her body had been compromised. No one ever asked what happened to the escort. It all builds to something that's both absurd and deeply disturbing. Virginity is treated as a tangible, measurable, almost physical object, something that can be held, confirmed, possessed, and once it's lost, you're not just less holy, you're less valuable. Literally, your dowry is worth less. Your chances of taking final vows drop. You become a risk. Your breathing becomes slower as you process this twisted logic. Now here's the quirky detail for this section. Brace yourself. Some medieval theologians argued that the Virgin Mary remained physically intact even after giving birth. No tearing, no blood, not even labor pains. This belief that her hymen stayed miraculously whole was debated for centuries. Entire treatises were written on this. It became an actual point of doctrine meant to underline her perpetual virginity. If the Church was this obsessed with a divine vagina, it's no wonder regular women didn't stand a chance. But back in the convent, you start seeing the small rebellions against this madness. One day, during lessons with Sister Avis, yes, she's taken you under her wing. You're copying psalms into a rough workbook, and she slides you a different page. It's not scripture, it's poetry. Soft, arcing, sharp. It reads like a confession, but not the kind you'd give to a priest. It's about touch, about longing, about hunger, but not for food or righteousness. It's written by a nun years ago. A name is signed at the bottom in faded ink, one you've never heard. You look up. Avis just shrugs. We preserve what we can. You begin to realize that not every sister here is defeated. Some of them have found ways to carve out spaces for themselves. In art, in words, in whispered memory. And some have even found closeness. Not all the attachments here are sisterly in the way the abbess would approve. You don't know everything yet, but you're starting to see it. In the looks passed during prayer, in the way certain pairs of nuns always sit beside each other, how one lingers a moment too long helping another wash her feet. And this opens up another question one scholars still argue over today. Were these emotional and physical relationships among nuns, romantic, sexual, spiritual, all of the above? There are records of love letters between sisters, of poems that drip with longing, of accounts that speak quietly of touch, settling into deeper peace now as complexity unfolds. Some historians believe these relationships were purely platonic expressions of deep spiritual connection. Others say they were very much romantic and very much physical. Just hidden behind the cloister walls and the Latin prayers, there's a term you'll learn later, particular friendship. It was the Church's polite way of describing those intense, exclusive bonds between women in religious life. The kind of relationship that made superiors nervous. The kind that, if discovered, could lead to forced separation, confession, punishment, but also the kind that kept some women sane in a place that constantly demanded silence and submission. That night, you watch as Sister Joan passes Sister Clarice a folded scrap of parchment in the corridor. They don't speak. Joan keeps walking. Clarice tucks it into her sleeve without looking. You feel the secret of it like a hum in the air. You're beginning to understand that the convent isn't just a prison. It's also a theater, a place where every woman wears a role. Non novice, prioress, penitent. But behind those parts, there are stories they won't put in registers. There are truths they whisper only to each other, or hide in ink. Your own role right now is the quiet one, the one who listens, watches, nods at the right time. But inside, you're building something, a map of names. Looks silence, and at the center of it is a question you can't shake. What happens to a woman who stops pretending? You start noticing the sounds, not the bells. That's easy. You've adjusted to those. No, it's the quieter things, the soft sighs in the dark after conflict, the subtle creak of floorboards when someone's walking where they shouldn't be, the rustle of parchment when it's not prayer time. There's a rhythm to life here. Yes, but under it runs a different current, a hidden cadence. You're beginning to move in sync with that one, the rhythm of secrets. It's a few weeks in when the nights start getting longer. Winter is settling over the convent, and you're waking up with frost on your blanket's edge. No one talks about it, but everyone moves slower, clutches their robes tighter. The chapel is colder than it should be. You swear the crucifix over the altar looks more judgmental when you're shivering. You've developed a habit of tucking your hands under your arms during prayer just to feel your own warmth. It's not dignified, but dignity is a luxury here. You spend more and more time with Sister Avis now. She doesn't ask why you're drawn to her, and you don't ask why she seems to know more than anyone else. She shows you the hidden spots of the convent, alcoves behind the cloister garden, a forgotten stairwell that leads nowhere, a loose stone behind the statue of St. Margaret where girls used to hide contraband. You begin to understand that every inch of this place holds stories, buried beneath layers of ash and incense. It's during one of these whispered explorations that she tells you about the night whispers. There's a tradition. She says, crouched beside you in the dark corridor behind the novice dormitory. After Compline, after lights out, some sisters talk in code. Murmure, question, prayers twisted into confessions. It's how truths survive. You ask if she's ever spoken them. She gives a half smile. Once, maybe twice, but mostly I listen. Tonight, as you drift toward the deepest sleep, let these secrets wrap around you like a blanket. Let the hidden world of medieval nuns reveal itself slowly, gently. Tomorrow brings more whispers, more coded messages, more women finding ways to survive in a system designed to silence them. Rest now in this understanding that even in the strictest cages, humanity finds ways to breathe, to connect, to rebel quietly. Sleep well, knowing that truth always finds a way to speak. Even when voices are forbidden, at night, back in your cot, you keep your ears open. And sure enough, there it is, a whisper, then another. Names, fragments. She said the priest touched? No, behind the scriptorum. They found it under her pillow. It's not constant, just scattered like leaves, stirred by wind. You lie still, pretending to sleep while your mind races, catching phrases and piecing together rumors that feel more real than anything you've been taught here. One voice mentions Sister Agnella. You remember her. Young, maybe 15, quiet, and with a permanent look of confusion, like she was always halfway into a thought. She hasn't been around for a few days. The official word is that she was sent to the infirmary with nerves. But the whispers say otherwise, that she was found in tears after confession, that she tried to run, that she might be locked in the cellar. You want to ask Avis, but you know she'll only tell you what she thinks you're ready to hear. So instead you wait, watch, take your time, and in the meantime, something else is brewing. One morning during chores, you're in the kitchen helping Sister Mirabelle chop onions when she pauses, knife still in hand, and says softly, "You know they're watching how close we get." You blink. Surprised, she nods toward a nearby doorway. Not them, she clarifies. The ones who send letters, inspectors, outside eyes, churchmen. She smiles faintly. They worry about us getting too fond of each other. It takes you a moment to understand. Then you do. You started seeing it too. the way two sisters linger a moment longer during prayers, the comfort of a hand brushing another's back as they pass. It's quiet, careful, intimate, but not all of it's innocent. Or if it is, it's innocent in the way a secret kiss is innocent. Brief, stolen, dangerous. Late one night, you pass by the garden and see Sister Joan sitting in the moonlight. Not alone, Sister Clarice is with her. Their heads bent together. There's nothing overt, just stillness. But the air feels heavy around them, as if the moment is holding its breath. You slip away unnoticed, your heart thudding louder than your footsteps. That night you lie awake wondering what rules are real and which ones are only enforced when convenient. Who decided holiness and loneliness had to be synonyms? And what does it mean that some sisters seem to find comfort in each other in ways the Church refuses to name? Your breathing becomes almost imperceptible now. So slow and peaceful. Here's your fringe fact of the day. In the 14th century, an Italian bishop launched a full investigation into improper attachments among nuns in his region. He believed these excessive affections were undermining the sacred nature of the convent. His report included testimonies, many probably coerced, about shared beds, passionate letters, and secret kisses. His solution: more isolation, less talking, more punishment. Because clearly, if two women cared for each other, it had to be the devil's work. But not all officials reacted that way. Some turned a blind eye. Some, disturbingly, were too busy taking advantage of their own access to nuns. It was safer, after all, to accuse women of weakness than to question the behavior of priests. And this opens up yet another scholarly debate. Were convents sites of repression or of freedom? For some women, it seems they were both a prison, yes, but also, oddly, a refuge, a place where a woman could read, learn, write, a place where she might find someone who actually listened. Even if it meant risking everything, you're starting to realize you're part of a lineage now, not just of faith, but of survival. Every whispered word, every hidden letter, every forbidden glance, it's all part of the same quiet rebellion. And while no one says it outright, there's a sense among the sisters that some rules are meant to be broken, or at least bent. You begin keeping your own notes. Nothing explicit, just little scraps of parchment tucked inside your psalter. Words, thoughts, observation. One entry reads, "She touches her shoulder like it's the last thing she'll ever hold." Another, "The truth hides in silence better than in prayer." You're not writing scripture, but it feels sacred anyway, and you're not alone. Settling into the final depth of peace as understanding blooms. It starts with a letter, not yours. You haven't dared to write anything beyond fragments. Riddles, really, disguised enough that even a priest might miss the meaning. No, this one's already opened when you find it. Tucked behind a loose stone in the cloister wall, barely sticking out like a tongue that forgot to keep quiet. You pull it free and it's fragile. Water-stained, someone's thumbprint has bled the ink in one corner, but the words are still readable. Barely. It's a love letter. You stare at it for a long moment in the garden shadow while the others clear away the frost-killed cabbage leaves. The parchment trembles slightly in your hands. Not from wind, but from what it says. No name is used. Just my beloved sister. It talks about the nights they've shared. The fear, the longing, and the promise of more. I press your hand even now. It ends. Though we're apart, you know what this is. You also know what it means. The rumors you've been collecting in your mind aren't just rumors. They're truths carefully wrapped in silence and passed hand to hand. There are relationships here, real ones, emotional, physical, hidden, but alive. Sister Joan and Clarice might be one. There could be others. You think of the way Sister Mirabel once looked at Avis when she thought no one was watching. Soft, aching. You could turn this in, hide it, burn it, but instead you fold it back carefully and return it to its crevice. You're not ready to carry that kind of weight alone. Not yet. That night you dream of fire, not hellfire, the kind they use in sermons, but small secret flames, candlelight in corners, warmth in fingertips. You wake up sweating and disoriented, the chill no match for the heat that lingers behind your ribs. The next morning, the routine continues. Prayer, shoaris, cold bread, and thinner broth. But now everything feels more alive, like the veil's been lifted just a little. The abbess lectures during scripture study about discipline in body and spirit, and all you can think about is that trembling ink on the letter. You glance across the chapel and see Sister Joan gazing at the stained glass with the serenity of a saint. But now you're not sure if it's real or just very good acting. In the laundry basin, Magdala hums a song, too cheerful to be holy, and says, "You know, if you're going to fall in love here, you better be subtle. Subtle like a shadow or a whisper." You stiffen. She laughs softly. "Relax. I'm not accusing you, but we've all seen it. It's not new." She tells you, as she wrings out a robe, that Sister Clemence once carved a name into the underside of her cot. Not a saint's, a fellow nun's. When it was found, they made her scrub the chapel floor for a month without speaking. She went hoarse from not speaking, and then she smiled through the whole thing, like she still had her secret. Magdala says, half impressed, half wistful, "Tonight, let these layers of complexity carry you into sleep. Let the truth of medieval women loving each other despite impossible circumstances wrap gently around your consciousness. Tomorrow brings more secrets, more connections, more proof that humanity persists even when crushed beneath holy authority. Rest now in the knowledge that love has always found ways to survive, even behind convent walls, even in the coldest winters, even when forbidden by men who claim to speak for God. Sleep well, gentle traveler through history. The nuns' stories continue tomorrow. But for now, let the whispers fade into peaceful dreams. Here's your historical nugget of truth for today. The church actually had policies vage ones about female-female intimacy in convents. Most of it was buried under euphemism. If a bishop got a whiff of something irregular, he might order the women separated or increase surveillance, or in rare cases, expel one of them. The punishment wasn't consistent because officials often didn't know what to make of it. They understood sin with men. They had whole libraries about that. But what two women did behind closed doors, that was a puzzle, an embarrassment. Some chose to pretend it didn't exist. Others panicked. The 12th century theologian Peter Abelard, yes, is it Abelard? The one who got famously castrated for his affair with Heloise, warned about particular friendships in female monasteries. He said they were the devil's mockery of holy affection, which, you have to admit, sounds more like jealousy than theology. And the debates haven't stopped. Modern scholars go in circles about whether these relationships were really sexual. Some insist they were just deeply emotional bonds born of isolation and the need for comfort. Others point to the surviving letters. poems, even trial records that say otherwise. It's hard to be sure, but if you've lived here even a few weeks, you start to understand that love, real love, finds a way to breathe. Even when everything else tries to choke it out, your muscles release completely as you settle into understanding. Later that week, Sister Avis leads you to a narrow room above the refectory, a storage space, long forgotten. Dust hangs in beams of light like suspended time. This, she says, used to be the novices' writing room before the scriptorium was reorganized. She says it with just enough sarcasm that you know something was covered up. She shows you what's left. Scratched messages in the wood, notes on faded parchment, too faint to read. A single sentence written in charcoal on the wall. My soul is mine, even if my body is not. You stare at it, the words almost humming. You ask her if she's ever loved someone here. She's quiet for a long time. Then, yes, just that. She doesn't elaborate and you don't push. But she touches the wall like she's remembering. You spend the next few nights with your heart a little louder. You start looking at the sisters not just as holy women, but as people, tired, complicated, full of half-spoken stories. Some suffer in silence, some rebel quietly. A few find something else. Connection, desire, love, whatever you call it. It's real, and now you're part of the story, whether you want to be or not, because the next night, as you sit copying psalms by lamplight, a scrap of parchment slides across your table. You don't see who sent it. You open it carefully. It's a line of verse. When I see you, I remember myself, no name, no signature, but you already know. The veil is thinning, drifting deeper into the gentlest peace now. It takes you 2 days to figure out who wrote the note. Not because you're slow, because whoever sent it is good. The ink matches no one's visible supply. The parchment is the kind kept for translating Latin, and it was slipped across the table during a scriptorium shift so silently you didn't even hear a breath. But it's the handwriting that gives it away. You've seen it before, curling just so round the tail of each S. The letters slightly slanted like they're leaning in to tell a secret. And when you check the margin notes in the Psalter copy Sister Clarice has been working on, there it is. Same hand, same ink, same quiet rhythm. You don't say anything to her. Not right away. But the next day, you linger after supper. You wait as the others rise for evening prayers. She doesn't look at you, but she doesn't hurry to leave either. You sit across from her in silence and then slowly slide a page toward her. Blank, except for a single line. I remember you too. She doesn't react, not visibly, but the next time she passes you in the hall, her fingers brush yours. Not accidentally. It begins. Not a romance. Not yet. But something, an understanding. A thread tied between you. Pulled tight through the hours of prayer and the harsh bells. Through cold meals and aching knees. You begin watching each other across the chapel. Across workstations. Through the fog of incense. In a place built to erase your selfhood. Here is someone reminding you that you still are someone. And this, of course, is forbidden, which is ironic because just this week, the confessor, Father Henri, preaches a homily about the boundless love of Christ. He loves us beyond comprehension. He says, his voice echoing against the chapel stone, he desires to dwell in us. He repeats that word desire more than once. You notice how Some sisters fidget. A few close their eyes, not in reverence, but retreat, because that kind of holy desire is the only kind you're allowed here. The kind that inflames but doesn't touch, that consumes but never satisfies. Anything else, that's sin. That's heresy. And yet, as you scrub the refectory floor later, Clarice walks past and drops a sprig of lavender at your knee. Nothing said, but the scent follows you all day. Even when you tuck it deep into your robe, it smells like defiance, settling into deeper rest, carried by understanding. Here's a strange historical tidbit for your collection. In some convents, priests had a private entrance, a literal door cut into the wall of the enclosure, often discreet, sometimes hidden, meant to allow confessors in without violating the cloister. But those doors, they didn't just let in prayers. They let in all kinds of things. Letters, food, gossip, and occasionally bodies. There are entire court records documenting inappropriate relationships between nuns and their confessors. Secret children, hidden money, even escape attempts. One case tells of a nun who gave birth in the infirmary and claimed it was a miracle. Nobody bought it. Your convent has such a door. You find it by accident one cold morning, chasing a wind-blown page from the scriptorum. It slips between the cracks of a forgotten hallway, down a tight set of stairs, and into a narrow alcove you've never seen. And there it is, small, iron-latched, reinforced with thick wood, the kind of door that doesn't creak, the kind made for silence. And it's not locked. You press your fingers against it just once, it doesn't give, but you hear movement on the other side. You step back. You don't wait to see what or who was listening. Later you tell Avis, she doesn't seem surprised. That door's older than the chapel. She says, older than most of us. You ask why it hasn't been sealed. She smiles faintly. Because people still use it. You ask who. She just says, that's not my secret to give. The next evening, while the rest of the convent prays, you linger near the hallway above that passage, and you hear it, quiet footsteps, not from the nun's side. Then a low voice, Male, Latin, but not scripture, a different cadence, a rhythm that sounds almost coaxing, then silence. The next morning, Sister Agnes doesn't appear for breakfast. No one says anything. So now you're holding two secrets. One blooming like a pressed flower between you and Clarice. The other darker, hidden, still forming behind that iron door. And still the routines go on. The day begins with matins, ends with Compline. The same chants, the same psalms. You recite them without hearing them now. Your mouth moving while your mind drifts. You start to understand the allure of escape. Not running exactly, but slipping into another layer of existence. One just beneath the rules. That's what Clarice has become for you. A glimpse into that quieter world, the one where you're more than your obedience. You exchange notes in the margins of your assigned texts. Nothing obvious, just single words. Audate, a question. A fragment from a hymn that's been bent into something else. You feel giddy, like a child hiding candy in her sleeves, but also guilty. And that's the part the church counts on. They've built a system where even tenderness is treason. And here's the question that plagues you as you lie awake one night watching moonlight trickle through the dormitory slit windows. Is what you're doing really wrong or just forbidden? Because not once have you felt distant from God while thinking about Clarice. In fact, you feel closer, like you're protecting something sacred, something true. Your breathing becomes barely perceptible now, so peaceful and slow. Scholars have chewed on this for decades. Were emotional bonds between nuns inherently sinful, or were they simply inconvenient to male authorities who needed to control women's bodies and loyalty? There are letters preserved from the 12th and 13th centuries between nuns that read like sonnets, full of aching devotion and physical yearning. Some argue they're spiritual. Others say they're evidence of love stories erased from history. You think it's both. You think these women loved each other in the only ways they could. And sometimes even beyond that, you've decided to write back again, but not with words. This time, you fold a scrap of fabric from your sleeve hem, lavender stitched like the sprig she gave you, and leave it beneath the kneeler in the far chapel alcove. The one no one uses. You don't see her find it. But the next day she looks at you during prayer, just once, and it's enough. The kind of look that says, I saw, and for a moment, just a flicker, you feel free. Tonight, as you approach the threshold of sleep, let these small rebellions settle gently in your heart. Let the truth of medieval women finding love, despite impossible odds, wrap around you like a warm blanket. Tomorrow brings more complexity, more danger, more proof that the human heart refuses to be caged, even by stone walls, even by holy vows, even by centuries of men insisting that love between women is impossible or sinful or both. Rest now in the knowledge that what you're discovering is real, that Clarice sees you, that you see her, that in a world designed to make you invisible, you've found someone who remembers you. Sleep well, gentle soul. The convent keeps its secrets close, but slowly. They're becoming yours to hold. Tomorrow, the story deepens. But tonight, just breathe, just rest. Just know that even in the darkest corners of history, love found a way. And it still does. You wake to screaming, not the kind of scream that echoes from a nightmare or a stubbed toe in the dark. This is raw, primal, and utterly out of place in a space that prides itself on silence. You're already sitting upright before your brain has caught up, heart galloping as if the sound itself has teeth. The other sisters are stirring, confused, murmuring prayers or clutching their rosaries like weapons. Then you hear the footsteps, heavy, rushed, someone shouting for the abbess. The screaming stops as suddenly as it began, leaving only ragged breath and frantic whispers. You lock eyes with Sister Avis across the room. Her face is unreadable, but her hand is already reaching for her cloak. No one tells you what happened at first. After the second bell rings, the abbess herself announces that morning prayer will be delayed, that something must be cleaned. The word she uses is cleansed, and it chills you more than the stone floor beneath your feet. By midday, the rumors are boiling. You find Sister Magdala alone in the kitchen, fingers still red from the cauldron, her mouth a tight line. They found something. She says quietly without preamble, a baby. The word drops like a stone. You're not sure you heard her right. A baby. She nods once, sharply. A novice gave birth last night. In silence, she smothered it. Then, after a beat, and tried to hide it in the bread oven. You feel sick. The heat of the kitchen, the smell of rising dough suddenly unbearable. Magdala says nothing else, just turns back to her kneading like it's penance. But her hands shake. That evening, the abbess calls a general assembly in the chapel. Everyone sits on the cold floor, arranged by rank. Eyes lowered. Her voice is thin but sharp, like a cracked bell. She speaks of shame, of sin, of moral rot. There are forces, she says, that wish to undermine the sanctity of this holy place. She calls the incident an abomination. The word hanging in the incense heavy air like smoke. The sister who committed the act is unnamed, but everyone knows who she means. Sister Avelina, the quiet girl from Normandy with a limp and a voice that cracked when she sang. She hadn't been seen since Compline. Some sisters cry, some pray, a few are frighteningly calm. Afterward you find Avis in the refectory staring into a bowl of cold broth she's not eating. She had no choice. She says, finally, no protection, no way to ask for help. She was terrified. You sit beside her, uncertain. Do you think it was a priest, Avis? Exhales slowly. If it was, we'll never hear his name. She'll carry all the weight, and that's how it works. The church writes its rules in stone, but buries the evidence in silence. If a nun is violated, she's often blamed. If she conceives, she's ruined, the men transferred, promoted, restored to grace. Your muscles release all tension as you sink into this dark truth. There's even a Latin term for it. Lapsus al That's how they record it in the books when a nun is found to have sinned, as if her body tripped and just happened to land in disgrace. And here's the horrific historical fact. This wasn't rare. Throughout the Middle Ages, there are multiple recorded cases of nuns becoming pregnant. Some by priests, some by visiting confessors, a few, tragically, even by their own family members before entering the convent. In many of these cases, the woman was punished, imprisoned, or in some instances, executed. The men, if acknowledged at all, were gently reprimanded and reassigned. And yes, sometimes the infants were hidden behind altars, in cellars, in ovens. You don't eat that night. The next morning, the entire convent is forced to fast. The abbess calls it purification. But you know it's punishment, a kind of collective atonement, as if hunger can erase the knowledge that someone among you was so afraid, so isolated, that she had to give birth in secret and then smother the proof. Clarice finds you after none. Her face is pale, her eyes hollow. She was in the dormitory last night. She whispers, I heard her breathing change. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't. She trails off. You take her hand, just for a moment, just long enough to say, you're not alone. That night the chapel is almost silent during Compline. Even the chanting is subdued, as if the building itself is holding its breath. You notice that two sisters are missing. Adelina, of course, and Sister Heloise, the one who always stood beside her. They were close, not whispered about close, but visibly attached. Now both gone. You think about what Avis said, about the priest, about the door. Later, in the dormitory, someone begins to cry. Just one soft sob. And then another. You don't look. You don't want to know whose grief is louder than their training, settling deeper into somber reflection now. Here's the strange forgotten fact for tonight. Some convents, especially the wealthier ones, had private birthing rooms, not for the nuns, but for noble women from outside who wanted to give birth in sanctity. The irony, the pregnant nun was a scandal, but the paying noble woman holy, respected, wrapped in lavender sheets, while midwives hummed Latin prayers. the same building. Two different fates. The convent absorbs this scandal the way it always does. With silence, a few weeks from now, new novices will arrive and won't know anything ever happened. The name Adelina won't be spoken. Her bed will be reset with fresh straw. The blood-stained linens already burned. Her fall reduced to a note in a dusty ledger. If that, but for now, you carry her in your thoughts. Not just her, but the baby too. Not because you knew them well, but because now that you know the truth, it doesn't unstick. It hangs in your lungs. It settles in the bones of this place like a second soul. And Clarisse, she's not the same either. Her eyes don't linger as long. Her touch is gentler, almost hesitant, as if your connection might vanish too. You can feel her mourning something bigger than just a lost friend. She's mourning safety, the illusion of protection, the myth that obedience keeps you whole. You wonder if the abbess knows that grief can be contagious. You wonder if that's why she's watching everyone more closely now. Your breathing becomes almost imperceptible, drifting toward peace despite the darkness. Winter has thickened. The cold no longer arrives. It lives here now. It curls round the corners of your cell, creeps beneath your robe, numbs your fingers during scripture copying, and settles into your lungs when you breathe too deeply during prayer. The stone walls sweat with frost. The candles are shorter. The silence is louder. There's a weight to everything now, like the convent has absorbed not just the cold, but the sorrow, the fear, and every secret that's been shoved beneath its stone skin. You try to keep your head down. After Adelina, the mood has shifted. The abbess walks faster, speaks sharper. Confession is no longer optional. Everyone is expected to participate twice a week, whether or not they feel the weight of sin. A few sisters have been reassigned. Clarisse now copies psalms next to Sister Rebecca, the abbess's most watchful enforcer. While you've been moved to the infirmary, you have steady hands. They say, you'll do fine with poultices. That's how you meet Sister Wolfhilde. She's not a nun like the others. She's older, not in years, but in presence, the kind of woman who feels older than the convent itself. She wears her habit loose, has hair too short to be properly concealed under her veil, and keeps a carved wooden pendant on a string around her wrist. A fox, not a saint. She tends to the sick, the injured, and sometimes the punished. If someone collapses during prayer, she's there before the final syllable of the psalm. If a novice cuts her hand on parchment, Wolfhilde appears with thread, alcohol, and a muttered chant that you're almost sure isn't Latin. On your third day in the infirmary, you watch her grind dried yarrow into a fine powder. This helps with bleeding. She says, especially when it comes from a place no man will name. She says it without pause, without flinching. You glance at the herbs lining the shelves. Most are common: comfrey, say, nettle, but others you don't recognize. Some are bound in red thread, marked with runes rather than labels. You see dried mandrake hanging upside down in a back corner, its roots twisted into something vaguely human. You're a healer. You ask, Wolfhilde grunts. I'm what they let me be. But I was trained by a wise woman before I ever put on this habit. Then with a smirk, the church prefers to call them witches. You don't ask if she still practices the old ways. The answer is already around you, drifting into the gentlest understanding now. Here's your quirky and unsettling historical fact. Before the witch-hunting frenzy really took off in the early modern period, many convents had sisters who served as unofficial herbalists. Some were trained midwives or learned apothecaries. Their knowledge of plants, cycler, and remedies passed down in whispers from mother to daughter, or in this case, from woman to woman in the cloister. They could ease childbirth, end unwanted pregnancies, or brew something that made the body forget its pain for a little while. The church tolerated them, even relied on them, until it didn't. Back in your workroom, you begin helping Wulfhilda measure tinctures, grind bark into dust, and apply salves to chapped skin. But more than that, you listen, because Wulfhilda doesn't just speak in recipes. She tells stories of sisters who healed each other when the church looked the other way, of prayers layered with older names. Brigid, Aona, Freya, deities from before the cross took root in every town square. Not all gods demand silence. She tells you while wrapping a sprained wrist. Some just want you to listen. You ask her cautiously if anyone else in the convent believes as she does. She doesn't answer at first, just ties the knot tighter. Then, we all believe what we need to survive. For some, that's Jesus. For others, it's memory. And for a few, it's the dirt beneath their feet and the smell of burning juniper. Tonight, as sleep approaches, let these layers of ancient wisdom settle over you. Let the knowledge that women have always found ways to survive, to heal, to remember, carry you into dreams. Tomorrow brings more secrets, more herbal wisdom, more proof that beneath the surface of every holy place, older truths still breathe. Rest now, knowing that Wulfhilda and women like her kept knowledge alive when the church tried to bury it. Sleep well, gentle traveler, the old ways whisper still. And some sisters never forgot how to listen. The next evening you notice something strange. Sister Margrethe, who'd been ill for weeks, suddenly stands during prayer without assistance. She looks stronger, eyes clearer. No one comments, but she pauses on the way out of chapel to press Wulfhilda's hand. Just once, a thank you, silent but understood. You realize that healing in this place happens beneath the rituals, the official herbs, the Latin chants, the holy water, all just a veneer. What really mends bodies and souls is the care passed hand to hand in rooms that the abbess rarely enters. You also realize how dangerous this is. If the church discovered Wulfhilda's methods, especially the herbs tucked in her private drawer, they'd accuse her of sorcery faster than they'd accuse a priest of anything. You begin helping in the garden too. Not the main one, with the withered kale and medicinal rosemary, but the one behind the old laundry where no one goes except Wulfhilda. And now you hear the herbs aren't labeled. You learn by smell and touch. Mugwort, skullcap, lady's mantle. You begin to memorize the feel of each plant between your fingers, the way their oils stain your nails. Clarice finds you there one afternoon. You didn't expect her, and for a moment neither of you says anything. Then she kneels beside you and begins pulling weeds like she's done it 100 times. I thought I'd lost you. She says, I've just been elsewhere. You say softly, I know. You both work in silence. The tension between you softer now. Clarice brushes your shoulder. This time you don't flinch. After that, she comes more often. You teach her the herbs you've learned. She shows you how to fold linen for wound dressings. One afternoon she picks a sprig of rue and tucks it into your sleeve. Protection, she says, old wives believe. And you understand. The secrets you're learning aren't just for healing. They're for survival, for rebellion, for remembering a kind of power the church would rather stay buried. Your entire being settles into peaceful acceptance now. Here's the scholarly debate you stumble into without warning. Was this kind of knowledge female, herbal, intimate, an early form of resistance? Some historians argue that healing was a tool for reclaiming agency in a system built on obedience. Others say it was simply necessity, not ideology. But in your hands, the soft leaves of feverfew feel like both. A quiet defiance, wrapped in green. You press your fingers to the soil, and for the first time in weeks, it feels warm beneath the frost. Not because winter is over, but because you found something alive under all this cold. And in the dark, secret garden behind the laundry house, you begin to believe that not every kind of faith starts at the altar. It happens during Vespers. You're kneeling on the chapel floor, head bowed like everyone else. But your eyes are half-lidded, fixed on the flickering candlelight, not the crucifix. The air smells of beeswax and old incense, and the rhythm of chanting has become something almost automatic. Your mouth forms Latin syllables like muscle memory while your mind floats elsewhere. And then, just as the choir reaches the Amen, a rustle, a shift, someone moving where no one should be. You glance sideways, slow and subtle, and see Sister Avis slipping out the side door of the chapel. She's not supposed to leave during prayer. Neither are you. But something in the way she moves, quiet, sir, practiced, tells you she's done this before, that there's something worth seeing outside the rhythm of psalms. You wait until the final bell rings and the sisters begin to rise. Then you duck your head, slide along the edge of the pews, and follow her. Outside, the wind slices sharp through your robe, but you ignore it. Avis moves fast, disappearing into the garden path beyond the old well. You catch up just as she's slipping behind the storage house near the outer wall, a place novices have no reason to go, except now. Apparently, you do. You find her crouched low, opening a loose panel in the stone. Behind it, a tunnel, narrow, crumbling, lit by nothing but the fading daylight at your back. She doesn't look surprised to see you. I figured you'd come. She says. You hesitate. Where does it go? Not far. She answers, but far enough. You duck inside. The tunnel smells of earth and old straw, and you have to hunch as you follow her through it. After a few dozen steps, you reach a low door. She knocks twice, then pushes it open. Inside is a small chamber lit by a single oil lamp and warmed by a brazier. And there, sitting cross-legged on a blanket, robes pulled loosely around his shoulders, is a man. You freeze. He doesn't. He nods once, then looks back to Avis. This her Avis shrugs. She's ready. You're not. Not really. But you step forward anyway. His name is Brother Aldrich, and he's not supposed to exist. Once a monk. He explains, handing you a steaming mug of something herbal. Now neither here nor there. You sip the drink and realize it's mulled wine. Forbidden. Delicious. Warming. Why are you here? Because I left. He says simply, because I couldn't live in a place where questioning is sin and obedience is holiness. He turns to Avis. Same for her. You glance at her startled. You left. She smiles faintly. Once, I came back. Not for them. For the ones like you. The ones who still don't know there's another way. And here it is. The other way. A loose network of women and a few men who found cracks in the wall. Who sneak through tunnels. Mate in hidden rooms. Share food. Ideas. Books. Sometimes more. They aren't formally organized. There's no grand rebellion. Just small acts of refusal passed quietly like seeds, settling into the deepest peace now as truth unfolds. Avis and Aldrich talk late into the night about texts you've never heard of, early Christian mystics, heretical writings, visions suppressed by Rome. They say Christ spoke in parables for a reason. They say not all saints were celibate. They say the church has never been afraid of sin. It's afraid of autonomy. And that's when the story of the nun who ran begins. Her name was Edgiva. It's whispered like legend in these secret corners. She was a sister at another convent, north, maybe in York, until she vanished. They say she escaped dressed as a monk. Some claim she was in love. Others say she had visions that no one believed. The church put out notices for her, branded her apostate, lost. But Avis says she isn't lost. I met her once. She says she lives near the coast now, helps women who've been cast out or who choose to walk away. You're stunned. She survived, she thrived. And here's the fringe historical gem for tonight. Nun runaways weren't rare. There are actual recorded cases, some in church records, others in legal complaints of women who left convents, disguised themselves, married, ran taverns, even joined pirate crews. One fled with a priest and opened a small school in secret. Some were caught and dragged back. Some were never found. One was excommunicated and canonized. Years apart, the line between heresy and sainthood, paper thin. You spend the night in that hidden room, not sleeping, listening, learning, thinking. When you finally return to the convent just before matins, you slip through the panel behind the garden. No one sees you, or maybe they do and choose not to care. That day you look at everything differently. The way the abbess preaches about obedience, like it's oxygen. The way Sister Rebecca sharpens her gaze on the young novices like she's expecting betrayal. The way Clarice carries her small secrets so carefully, like fragile glass. You catch her in the hallway after supper. Tell her softly, there's more outside the wall. She stares at you. And then, to your surprise, she nods. I know. She says, you don't ask what she means. You're starting to understand that all of you, Clarice, Avis, even Sister Wolfhilda, are linked, not by rules, but by refusal. You're nuns. Yes, but you're also something else. Women who've seen the edge of the page and chosen to keep reading. The abbess will never know what was whispered behind the wall tonight. And if she ever finds out, you'll know how to disappear. Your breathing becomes barely perceptible as you drift toward the deepest rest. It's strange how easily sin becomes currency. You start to notice it slowly, like mold creeping along the edge of a page. It begins in confession. Father Henri, seated in the claustrophobic wooden booth in the chapel's south transept, beckons each sister one by one. You kneel, you speak, you confess. That's how it's supposed to work. But over time you realize he doesn't listen like a priest. He listens like a collector. filing every word away, not for your redemption, but for his own quiet vault. You see it in how he lingers too long in the confessional with the younger sisters, how his voice softens when he addresses the noble-born ones, and how he eyes Sister Clarice after she leaves the booth, as if he knows something he shouldn't, something she never meant to give. You ask her one evening in the garden if everything's all right. She hesitates. He asked about you. She finally says, "He wanted to know if we speak, if we're close." You stiffen. "What did you say?" "I lied." The next day, you're summoned to confession. No surprise. You kneel, heart thudding like a drum in your throat. The air smells of old incense and oiled wood. The grill between you and Father Henri seems too thin. You can hear his breath. You wonder if he can hear yours. "Daughter," he begins. "You've been quiet lately. Are you hiding anything?" You murmur the usual. Impatience. Wandering thoughts during prayer. Envy. There's a pause. Then, and affection. Have you felt any inappropriate affection for your sisters? You freeze. It's not subtle, not even a little. No. You say carefully, "Silence," because it's important to be truthful. He says, voice lower now, "Some sins fester in darkness." You leave that booth with a chill that no woolen robe can fix. Tonight, as sleep embraces you completely, let this understanding settle. That confession in medieval convents wasn't always about salvation. Sometimes it was about surveillance, about control, about gathering secrets that could be weaponized later. Rest now, knowing that you're learning to protect yourself, that you're finding ways to survive even this. Tomorrow brings more challenges, more tests, more proof that the convent is as much a political battlefield as a spiritual refuge. Sleep well, gentle soul. You're stronger than you know. And the walls, they're not as solid as they seem. That night you find Sister Avis in the scriptorum copying a hagiography with such precision it might as well be a spell. She doesn't look up when you sit beside her. He's starting to probe. You say, she nods. He always does when he's bored. And then she says something that sticks. The confessional is a stage. You just have to learn how to give a convincing performance. It dawns on you then. Some sisters treat confession like a game, not out of disrespect, but self-preservation. They craft sins that sound just guilty enough to satisfy the priest, but harmless enough to keep him from digging deeper. I was prideful. I envied Sister Joan's singing voice. I doubted during matins. These are safe sins, acceptable ones, the kinds that buy you privacy for another week. But slip even slightly, and your soul becomes leverage, because that's what Father Henri does. He trades in guilt. He stores it like treasure, and sometimes he uses it. You overhear him in the corridor one afternoon speaking with the abbess. His voice is quiet, but the word inappropriate cuts through like a dagger. You see Sister Ida walk past minutes later. Pale, trembling, she's reassigned that evening, sent to the cellar to scrub floors and copy penitential psalms by candlelight. You never see her speak freely again. This is how power works here. And it's not just Father Henri. The abbess uses guilt like mortar. Sister Rebecca wields obedience like a sword. Ava's sister Jon, privileged and poised, knows how to twist silence into advantage. One word from her, one tilt of the head, and another novice gets extra chores or loses her writing privileges for a week. You begin to understand that in this place, piety is performative. Confession is currency. And virtue is just a convenient disguise for control. Your muscles release completely as you accept this dark reality. Here's your unsettling historical fact of the day. Some medieval confessors were trained not just to absolve sin, but to extract it. They were given manuals, literal playbooks that listed categories of sin and suggested how to question penitents about them. Ask if she has touched herself. Ask if she has lain beside another. Ask if her thoughts during prayer have wandered to the flesh. These weren't guesses. These were scripts. And women, especially nuns, were expected to answer in detail. Sometimes the questioning itself was the sin. There's a scholar who argues that medieval confession booths functioned as the first psychological surveillance chambers, a place where women's thoughts, dreams, even their imagined desires could be weaponized against them. No action required. Just thinking the wrong thing could get you branded impure. You start keeping your real thoughts to yourself, not in your psalter, not in notes to Clarice. You bury them deep where neither priest nor parchment can find them. Your sin, if it even is sin, belongs to you. One afternoon you're stopped in the hallway by Father Henri. He smiles too gently. "Daughter," he says, "I sense restlessness in you. Perhaps we should schedule a private session." You smile back the way you've practiced. "Thank you, Father. I will reflect on my need for guidance." Then you walk away. And that night you meet Clarice behind the old laundry house. She holds your hand in the dark and tells you about her dream. A dream where you both live by the sea, growing herbs and reading psalms without Latin or permission. No walls, no bells, just wind and salt and the sound of your own name spoken without fear. You believe in that dream now, not as fantasy, as a goal, but for now, you play the game. In your next confession, you say, "I coveted Sister Wolfhilda's apothecary skills. I felt pride when I remembered a psalm no one else could. I doubted the abbess's wisdom for a moment. The penance is light. The door opens, and you keep your real secrets folded like a letter behind your heart, settling into the final depths of peace now, ready for dreams. The weeks pass. Winter deepens, but something is changing. You feel it in the way the younger novices look at each other, in the way Sister Magdala hums while working, in the way Avis smiles more often. There's a quiet revolution happening, not with swords or manifestos, but with small acts of refusal. A sister takes an extra moment before bowing. Another leaves her veil slightly loose. Someone carves a message into the underside of a bench. We remember. You and Clarice grow closer, not just emotionally, but in purpose. You share the dream of leaving, of finding Edgiva by the coast, of living free. One night, Wolfhilda calls you both to the infirmary. She has a bundle prepared, herbs, tinctures, dried food, a map drawn on cloth. You're leaving soon, she says. It's not a question. Clarice looks at you. You nod. Wolfhilda continues. There's a trader who comes through every month. He'll take passengers if you have something to offer. She hands you a small leather pouch. Quines? Where did you? Don't ask. She says, just go. Live. Remember us. You embrace her. This woman who taught you that healing is rebellion. That knowledge is survival. That some kinds of faith have nothing to do with churches. The night you leave, the convent is sleeping. You and Clarice slip through Avis's tunnel. Brother Aldrich meets you on the other side with provisions and a horse. He doesn't say much, just a Jivas waiting. You ride through the darkness, hearts pounding, not with fear, but with hope. By dawn, you're far enough that the bells can't reach you. You stop by a stream, wash your faces, take off your veils. Your hair falls free. Clarice laughs. You haven't heard that sound in months. It's like sunlight. You reach the coast 3 days later, and there she is, a jiva, older than you expected, strong, weathered by wind and freedom. She welcomes you into her small cottage. You're safe now, she says. Here's your final historical truth for this journey. Some nuns did escape. Some did build new lives. Some formed communities of women who'd fled convents. Abusive marriages, impossible situation. They helped each other, healed each other, remembered each other. They weren't written about much, but they existed. And their stories whispered from woman to woman across centuries, survived. You and Clarice settle into your new life. You grow herbs. You help women who need healing or sanctuary. You write, not scripture, but your own stories, the truth of what happened behind those walls. One day, a young woman arrives, frightened, pregnant, nowhere to go. You take her in. You help her give birth safely. You show her she's not alone. And you realize this is what the convent should have been. A place where women are safe, where they're seen, where they're free. Years pass. You and Clarice grow old together. Your garden flourishes. Your cottage becomes known as a place of refuge. Women come from far away seeking help. You give it freely. One evening, as the sun sets over the water, Clarice takes your hand. We made it, she says. You nod. We did. And here's the final truth that settles over you like a blessing. The convent tried to cage you. The church tried to silence you. But you found a way through, not by fighting the walls, but by finding the cracks, by helping each other, by refusing to believe that suffering was holy or that freedom was sin. You lean against Clarice and watch the waves. Tomorrow more women will come. More stories will be told. More healing will happen. But tonight, you simply rest in the knowledge that you survived, that you're free, that love won. And as you drift towards sleep in this life you've built, you think of the sisters still behind those walls, the ones who whisper in the dark, who pass notes in the margins, who dream of something more. You think of Avis, of Wulfhilda, of Magdala, of all the women who couldn't leave but who kept the flame alive anyway. You whisper a prayer, not to the God of the church, but to something older, wider, more generous. May they find their own cracks in the wall. May they remember they're more than their obedience. May they know that even in the darkest places, love survives. May they find their way to the sea. And as sleep finally takes you, you smile because you know the truth now. The convent never owned you. Not really. Your soul was always yours. Your love was always real. Your freedom was always possible. It just took courage to reach for it. Good night, brave traveler through medieval secrets. Good night to all the women who survived behind stone walls. Good night to the nuns who loved each other despite impossible odds. Good night to the healers who kept ancient knowledge alive. Good night to everyone who ever felt trapped but refused to give up hope. Sleep well, knowing that walls eventually crumble. That truth eventually speaks. That Love, even when forbidden, even when punished, even when erased from official records, somehow survives. The sea is quiet tonight. The stars are bright, and you, dear friend, you made it through. Rest now in the knowledge that every cage has a key, every wall has a crack, every silence can be broken, and every woman who's ever been told she's not enough, not worthy, not free, is wrong. You were always enough. You were always worthy. You were always free. You just had to remember. Good night. Sleep well, and may you wake tomorrow knowing that your story, like the stories of these medieval nuns, matters, that your voice deserves to be heard, that your love, whoever you love, is hoy, that your freedom is worth fighting for. The convent is far behind you now. The bells can't reach you anymore. And the life you've built, with Clarice by your side, with women you've helped, with truths you've preserved, that life is yours, truly yours. Sleep peacefully, gentle soul. Tomorrow the sea will still be there. The herbs will still grow. The women will still come seeking refuge, and you'll be there to help them. Because that's what the nuns who loved each other, who healed each other, who freed each other, always did. They survived. They remembered. They passed the truth forward. And now you're part of that lineage. Rest well, knowing you're never alone, that across centuries, women have been doing exactly what you did. Finding cracks in walls, loving despite rules, surviving despite everything. Medieval world is gone, but its lessons remain. Sleep now, dream of the sea, and wake tomorrow ready to help the next woman who needs to know that escape is possible. That love is real. That freedom waits. Good night. Dear friend, good night to all who wander through history seeking truth. Good night to every secret whispered in the dark. Good night to the nuns, the healers, the lovers, the rebels, the survivors. May you all find peace. May you all find freedom. May you all remember that you were never truly caged. Your spirit was always free. It just took time to realize it. Sleep well. The story is complete, but the truth continues forever